I brought my girlfriend home to meet my mom. Then she revealed a secret she'd hidden for 22 years. I thought I was introducing my family to the woman I was going to marry. Instead, I discovered the biggest lie my mother had ever kept from me. Even now, years later, I still replay that day in my head. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had decided to introduce my girlfriend a week later. Or a month later. Maybe we would have gotten engaged. Maybe we would have gotten married. Maybe we would have had children. The thought still makes me sick. My name is Daniel. I was 26 years old when everything I believed about my family fell apart. I'd been dating my girlfriend, Sophie, for almost 2 years. She was everything I had ever wanted. Funny. Kind. Patient. The kind of person who made everyone around her feel comfortable. Even strangers. We met by accident at a coffee shop. She spilled coffee all over my laptop. She insisted on buying me a new one. Instead, I asked if she'd let me buy her dinner. She laughed. That's how it started. 2 years later, I had already bought a ring. I was just waiting for the right moment. But before I proposed, there was something important I wanted. I wanted her to meet my family. Especially my mom. Growing up, my mom and I had always been close. She raised me mostly on her own because my dad worked overseas for months at a time. She'd always told me one thing. If I don't like the woman you marry, you'll know. She was joking. At least I thought she was. When I called to tell her I was bringing Sophie over for Sunday dinner, she sounded excited. I've been waiting for this day, she laughed. So have I. I had no reason to think anything was wrong. Sunday finally arrived. Sophie was nervous. She'd changed outfits 3 times before we left the apartment. What if your mom doesn't like me? I smiled. She'll love you. I wish I'd never said those words. The drive to my childhood home took about 40 minutes. Everything felt normal. We laughed. We sang along to the radio. We talked about what our future might look like. Kids. A house. Marriage. Neither of us had any idea that none of those dreams were going to happen. We pulled into my mother's driveway. She was already standing outside waiting. The moment she saw us, she smiled. She opened her arms. I introduced them. Mom, this is Sophie. Sophie smiled politely. It's so nice to finally meet you. Then something happened that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. My mother's smile disappeared. She didn't answer. She just stared. Not for 2 seconds. Not for 5. Almost 30 seconds. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. Her face turned pale. Her hands started shaking. Mom. She ignored me. She kept staring at Sophie. Then, without warning, she started crying. Real crying. The kind that comes from somewhere deep inside. I had never seen my mother cry like that before. Sophie looked just as confused as I was. Did I do something wrong? My mother slowly walked closer. She reached toward Sophie's face. Her hand was trembling. She gently moved a strand of hair behind Sophie's ear. Then she froze. There was a small birthmark. Just behind Sophie's left ear. A tiny crescent-shaped mark. My mother covered her mouth. Oh, my God. I stepped forward. Mom, what's happening? She didn't answer. Instead, she asked Sophie a question. When's your birthday? Sophie told her. My mother's knees almost gave out. Then came another question. Were you adopted? The entire room went silent. Sophie looked surprised. Yes. My heart started racing. My mother looked like she couldn't breathe. How old were you when you found out? I've always known. My mother sat down without saying a word. She looked like every ounce of strength had left her body. Then she whispered. Who were your adoptive parents? Sophie answered. My mother closed her eyes. Tears streamed down her face. I had never seen fear like that. Not fear for herself. Fear of what she was about to say. I grabbed her shoulders. Mom. She looked at me. Then at Sophie. Then back at me. Her voice was barely a whisper. I've kept a secret. For 22 years. The room felt frozen. I was 16. She paused to wipe away tears. I got pregnant. Neither of us moved. My parents were ashamed. They told everyone I was visiting relatives for a few months. But I wasn't. I was giving birth. Sophie's breathing became heavier. I wanted to keep my baby. I begged them. I cried every single day. But they said keeping her would ruin my future. They made the decision for me. They gave my baby away. The room spun. I looked at Sophie. She looked at my mother. Neither of them spoke. Then my mother said the words that changed my life forever. I've been looking for my daughter. Ever since the day they took her away. I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because my brain refused to believe what I was hearing. No. I shook my head. No. My mother was crying uncontrollably now. She looked directly at Sophie. Then she whispered. I think. You're my daughter. Everything inside me stopped. I turned to Sophie. She was crying too. Neither of us knew what to say. Neither of us knew what to think. But deep down, both of us were terrified that my mother might be telling the truth. The room was completely silent. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. I looked at my mother. Then at Sophie. Then back at my mother. Finally, I managed to ask the only question running through my mind. What are you saying? My mother's hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold her glass of water. I don't know for certain, she whispered. But the birthday, the adoption, that birthmark. She looked at Sophie again. My daughter had that exact birthmark. Sophie's face had gone completely pale. She looked like someone had just ripped the ground out from under her. There has to be another explanation, she said. There are thousands of adopted children. There are thousands of people with birthmarks. My mother nodded. I know. I've told myself that for 22 years. She stood up and disappeared into her bedroom. A few minutes later, she returned carrying a small cardboard box. It looked old. Worn. Like it had been opened hundreds of times. She placed it on the kitchen table. I've never shown this to anyone. Slowly, she lifted the lid. Inside were dozens of photographs. A tiny knitted baby blanket. Hospital bracelets. A pair of pink baby socks. And hundreds of letters. Letters addressed to someone who had never read them. Every birthday. My mother had written another letter to the daughter she lost. 22 birthdays. 22 letters. She had kept every single one. Sophie picked up the first letter with trembling hands. She didn't even make it halfway through before she started crying. I never stopped loving you. I never wanted to give you away. I hope wherever you are, you're happy. I hope one day you'll forgive me. The room was filled with nothing but tears. I had spent my whole life believing I knew everything about my mother. I realized I barely knew her at all. Then Sophie asked a question none of us were ready for. If this is true. She looked at me. What does that make us? Nobody answered. Nobody needed to. The possibility hung in the air like a storm cloud. My mother finally broke the silence. We need proof. The next morning, we drove to a DNA testing clinic. The drive felt endless. Nobody turned on the radio. Nobody looked at each other. I kept hoping someone would laugh and say we'd made a ridiculous mistake. Instead, everyone sat in silence. The nurse collected our samples. She smiled politely. We should have your results in about a week. A week. It sounded impossible. How was I supposed to live normally for 7 days? I couldn't sleep. Neither could Sophie. We barely spoke. Not because we were angry. Because we were terrified. One night she called me. I keep hoping your mom is wrong. So do I. What if she isn't? I couldn't answer. A few days later, she texted me a photo. It was the engagement ring I'd secretly shown her months earlier when we were joking about marriage. She wrote only 4 words. I'm scared, Daniel. I stared at my phone for almost an hour before replying. So am I. Those 7 days felt longer than the previous 26 years of my life. Then the phone rang. The clinic. The results are ready. I don't remember the drive there. Only my heartbeat. It felt like it was trying to escape my chest. The 3 of us sat together in a small office. The genetic counselor walked in carrying a folder. She sat down. Looked at each of us. Then opened it. I'm very sorry. Those 4 words were enough. I already knew. The DNA results confirm. She paused. That you share the same biological mother. I looked at Sophie. She looked at me. Neither of us cried. Neither of us spoke. It was as if our emotions had simply shut down. Everything we dreamed about together. Marriage. Children. Growing old together. It disappeared in a single sentence. The woman I loved was my sister. I walked out of the building without saying a word. I sat alone in my car for nearly 2 hours, trying to understand how life could change so completely in one afternoon. Then there was a knock on my window. It was Sophie. She got into the passenger seat. We sat there in silence. Finally, she whispered, I don't know how to stop loving you overnight. Those words broke me. I buried my face in my hands and cried harder than I ever had in my life. She reached over and held my hand. Not like a girlfriend. Not anymore. Just someone who was grieving the same impossible loss. For nearly 20 minutes, neither of us said anything. Then she took a deep breath. I think we both know what we have to do. I nodded. We can't keep pretending. She squeezed my hand one last time. No. We can't. We hugged each other. Not as 2 people saying goodbye to a relationship, but as 2 siblings who had just found each other in the most heartbreaking way imaginable. As she walked away, I realized something. The hardest part of this story still hadn't happened. Because my mother still had one question she had never answered. Why had she waited 22 years to tell the truth? And when she finally answered that question, it changed everything I thought I knew about my family. For almost a week after the DNA results, I couldn't look at my mother. Every time I saw her, I felt 2 emotions at once. I loved her. And I was angry with her. Not because she had given Sophie up for adoption. I understood she had been 16 years old. I understood she had been scared. I understood she hadn't made that decision alone. What I couldn't understand was why she had kept it a secret from me for 26 years. She had watched me fall in love with my own sister. She had watched us spend holidays together. She had watched us talk about marriage. Why hadn't she said something? One evening, I finally drove to her house. She opened the door before I even knocked. Almost as if she had been expecting me. I knew you'd come. I walked inside. Neither of us sat down. I looked her straight in the eyes. Why? She lowered her head. I was ashamed. No. I shook my head. That's not enough. You saw us together. You heard us talk about getting married. You still stayed quiet. Tears rolled down her face. I never imagined. She stopped speaking. I never imagined she'd find you. The room fell silent. I searched for her for years. I hired investigators when I could afford it. I wrote letters. I contacted adoption agencies. I never found anything. Eventually, she looked away. I convinced myself I'd never see her again. She wiped her eyes. So when you told me you had a girlfriend, I was happy. When you said you wanted me to meet her, I was excited. I had no reason to believe. Her voice broke. That life could be so cruel. I believed her. For the first time since all of this started. I believed every word. Then she walked into her bedroom. She came back carrying another small box. I was going to leave this to you after I died. Inside was a tiny pink bracelet from the hospital. A photograph of a newborn baby wrapped in a white blanket. And hundreds of letters. One for every birthday Sophie had ever missed. One for her first day of school. One for her 18th birthday. One for her graduation. One for the day she imagined Sophie would get married. My mother had written letters for moments she never got to witness. She had loved her daughter every single day. Even from a distance. I asked quietly, "Can I give these to her?" She nodded. "I think it's finally time." The next day, I met Sophie at a quiet park. Neither of us really knew how to act anymore. We weren't a couple. But calling each other brother and sister still felt strange. I handed her the box. She looked confused. "What's this?" "My mom wanted you to have it." She slowly opened it. The moment she saw the letters, she started crying. She spent nearly an hour reading them. Sometimes smiling. Sometimes laughing. Mostly crying. Finally, she looked at me. I spent my whole life wondering if my biological mother ever thought about me. She held one of the letters against her chest. I guess I finally have my answer. A few weeks later, Sophie decided she wanted to meet the grandparents who had forced the adoption. My mother wasn't sure it was a good idea. But Sophie insisted. They made a decision that changed all of our lives. I deserved to hear it from them. When we arrived, my grandparents looked shocked. They hadn't seen Sophie since the day she was born. My grandmother broke down immediately. She admitted everything. "We thought we were protecting your mother's future. We were wrong. We've regretted it every day." My grandfather didn't speak for a long time. Then, with tears in his eyes, he whispered, "I stole 22 years from this family." Nobody yelled. Nobody argued. Some wounds are too deep for anger. Only regret remained. Months passed. Slowly. Pain turned into healing. Sophie and I stopped trying to force ourselves into roles we didn't understand. We weren't boyfriend and girlfriend anymore. But we became something neither of us had ever expected. Real siblings. She started calling me whenever something good happened. Or something bad. I became the annoying older brother she never had. She became the little sister I never knew I was missing. Life wasn't the one we'd planned. But somehow, it became a life worth living. Last Christmas was the first time all three of us sat around the same dinner table. My mother, Sophie, and me. At one point, I looked around the room and realized something. We had all lost something. My mother lost 22 years with her daughter. Sophie lost 22 years with her biological family. I lost the woman I thought I was going to marry. But we also found something. Each other. Sometimes life doesn't give you the ending you dreamed of. Sometimes it gives you the family you never knew you were missing. If my mother hadn't found the courage to tell the truth that day, I might have spent the rest of my life living a lie. Instead, I lost a girlfriend. But I found a sister. And for the first time in 22 years, my mother finally had both of her children sitting beside her. No more secrets. No more lies. Just a family. Finally made whole.